Hi there. I want to walk you through a couple things here. We've shared an Excel template for curriculum mapping, and we've shared a curriculum mapping handbook. And I want to use this video resource just to show how to use this template to accomplish what's in the handbook. So first in this template, you'll see some adapted steps, the same steps that are in the curriculum mapping handbook. Let's talk through those first, and then we'll talk through kind of the sheet itself and its functionality. The first step is to decide on the template you want to use, decide on how to set up the template to include the data you need for the type of analysis you're interested in. All curriculum maps are based on showing program learning outcomes on one axis, in this case the vertical axis, and they show program learning outcomes and the courses in a program. In this case, courses are shown horizontally. So in some instances, those are flipped, but in this case, the horizontal progression of courses shows kind of how we move through 3 levels. We've also defined those levels. We define the progression from introduced to reinforced to mastered. So topic, learning, skills, knowledge related to each program learning outcome is first introduced and then reinforced and then mastered. And there's definitions in the workbook itself, in the template itself, and you may want to choose to modify those and adopt those as you adopt those for your purposes within your discipline. There may be some other language that makes more sense for you to illustrate that progression. So you want to think about that in terms of the data you want, the analysis you want to be able to do. Secondly, you'll see there's kind of the rows are in groups of 3. The first, blue, the bold, is the program learning outcome statement itself with the introduced, reinforced, mastered. The next row underneath that in each program learning outcome is the course learning outcomes. So that's not necessarily included in every curriculum map, but it's great practice. This lets you ensure that your course learning outcomes are aligned with your program learning outcomes. The language makes sense, the verbiage makes sense, the learning verbs that are used. It also lets you consider how the learning verbs and the progression of course learning outcomes from introductory courses to courses where the program learning is reinforced, to courses where the program learning is mastered, makes sense. You want to see kind of a leveling of that course learning outcome language or progression, a scaffolding, if you will, in the language that's used there. Um, and it's up to you and your discipline, your content to determine how quick that should happen. In this case, there's a couple instances where something's reinforced twice. Or introduced twice. You may introduce some program learning outcome in a number of courses to really get some breadth before moving on to higher levels of expectation where the learning's then reinforced. Or similarly, maybe you're reinforced in a number of courses to get breadth and reinforcement prior to mastery. May also be mastered a few times. So this is a simplified example, but the way that happens within your program, within your discipline, is up to you. Finally, the last thing you see on each kind of group of 3 for each program learning outcome is you see assessment methods suggested here. And we know those vary from instructor to instructor most of the time. But it's really interesting to be able to kind of look at all of the assessment methods all together for each program learning outcome as there's progression through a program. And this lets us see if there's a strong theme, if there's, more variation than we might expect or wish to see, or it lets us see kind of what it looks like at the mastery level, right? Have we sufficiently built toward that mastery level for types of assessments and the ways we're expecting to see students demonstrate their knowledge? So what you include and how much of that you include will be up to you, will be up to your program area, maybe the time you have to do this work, but absolutely it'll be influenced by the type of analysis you want to be able to do at the end of the day with this work. There are some suggested questions for starting points for analysis in the template itself, and this is all just to serve as an indicator of what's happening with your curriculum. It's to serve as kind of a starting point to explore and do some further research in what's happening with the curriculum of your program. A couple of the things you see here then in terms of the steps to getting this built. Down the left-hand side, you're going to need program learning outcomes. If you don't have them yet, we can help you create them. We have resources on how to create them as well. You're going to need to decide which courses along the horizontal axis you want to include. Definitely the required courses in your programs will be there. Those likely some within your discipline, likely some outside your discipline as well, so you may have to collaborate outside your discipline. And then it's good to think about whether you want to include elective courses. Certainly if you're expecting electives to contribute to program learning outcomes, it would make good sense to include them. If you have elective courses that you're not expecting to contribute to program learning outcomes, perhaps they get excluded. But that's one of the conversations you want to have as a starting point to lay the foundation here before you get into the work. Let's flip now to the Excel workbook itself, because we're kind of getting into how you're going to populate this and what you're going to populate here. Once all that's determined, you're going to begin inputting your starting data. So you're going to be editing these cells down this second column, where you're going to be adding the text for your program learning outcomes. You're also going to be editing these cells. This is row 2. I think in the map template, it's row 1. You're going to be editing these cells for the titles of each of your courses. And I don't think I mentioned this a moment ago, but you may also choose to add co-requisites and prerequisites, particularly if your program is assessing those relationships. This can be a really useful way to see how course learning outcome language reinforces, confirms, validates a prerequisite relationship or a co-requisite relationship. Or there may be instances where course learning outcome language is not, does not explicitly suggest a connection, and then we have to reevaluate that requisite relationship. Maybe the requisite relationship's not necessary, or maybe the course learning outcomes need to be adjusted to ensure that the requisite relationship is explicit, right? Maybe we need to make sure we're assessing those learning outcomes in the way we should, so that the requisite can really serve its full purpose explicitly. Those are two pieces of kind of inputting your starting data, and then we're ready to get into really kind of the body, really kind of the meat and potatoes of the curriculum map itself, and that's everything in this central space that I just highlighted. This is best done by faculty, ideally faculty that have recently taught a course, so they have familiarity and recency, currency with the course itself. You may have instances where a number of faculty teach a single course, and that could be a great opportunity for collaboration. It may be that one individual may associate the course with specific program learning outcomes, and other individuals may associate it with others. And that's a really interesting opportunity for conversation. And we can look at how we're interpreting the course learning outcomes and how we're interpreting the program learning outcomes, perhaps to seek to move towards more explicit language and to support more consistent interpretation. Once the data's in, once we've entered these cells that tell us where we're introducing, reinforcing, mastering an outcome, these cells that tell us what our course learning outcomes are, and the cells that tell us about our assessment, then we can really begin to collaborate and on some analysis. We can look at what this tells us. We can look at where we know the pinch points or pain points or bottlenecks are for students in their learning towards these program learning outcomes, and we can look at what the map says about that. If program learning outcome 1 is consistently a bottleneck, maybe we don't have enough touch points. Maybe we're not doing enough to establish some introductory breadth or to really reinforce the learning before we get to mastery. Maybe there's some more learning happening surrounding program learning outcome 1 that we want to make explicit, more intentional to better support our students. Or the opposite is true. Maybe we have areas of strength and we want to look at that area of strength and ask ourselves, what are we doing there? How could we use that as an example to build on, to apply elsewhere, and develop other program learning outcomes in the way we did here, where we're seeing such strength and such great results from our students. Finally, then you're going to want to use this every time you update your curriculum. If you're adding a new course, if you're redefining course relationships, if you're redefining course learning outcomes, you should be able to kind of make sense of that in light of this larger program level curriculum view. Are the changes we're proposing to make validated, substantiated by looking at them at this high level and in light of all these program learning outcomes. So there's kind of a why and a bit of a what. That should hopefully get you some further understanding as you seek to decide what are we going to include. And then hopefully once you're getting into the work, kind of 8 quick notes here are going to set you up for success in using this tool and using this template as we've created it. I'll go around the notes kind of in a clockwise fashion, starting at number 1 here. So note 1 is about adding rows. You may be in a situation where you need to add some rows. So if you select row 28 in this case, the last row, by selecting that, right-clicking, I can insert some rows above. Insert row above. And then I can copy these 3. So for 25, 26, 27 are the 3 that I want. I can copy those 3 rows and I can paste starting right here. So all the content from those 3 rows into the next 3 rows. And then I've got my formulas and I've got my formatting. It's all just going to copy down. So that's a really useful starting point if you want to grow your notebook and add some rows to your notebook. Notes 2 and 3 are about filtering. So this in Excel, this is built as a table to allow this filtering. So if I just want to look at program learning outcomes, I can use this drop-down menu here, and it simplifies what I'm looking at. And I'm now just looking at the program learning outcomes in this data, and I'm not looking at course learning outcomes or assessments in this view. I can turn all that back on. I can select all the types of data again from the first column on the left and view that way. I can also use in the same way, I can filter by specific program learning outcomes. So if, for example, I wanted to look at program learning outcome 1 and how it was built up alongside program learning outcome 3, I could do that here. And now that in this view, I'm just seeing those two. I filtered everything else, and I've got kind of a nicer, easier visual to work with. Those are the filters, and that's part of the rationale for why this is built as a table. The other thing you may want to do is look at some courses side by side. So if I wanted to look at CTL 101 alongside CTL 110, or sorry, let's say 210, I can hide everything in between. So now I'm looking at column D right beside column I, and I'm looking at CTL 101 right beside CTL 210. I've hidden everything in between, so I can just see the relationship between those two courses. This may be really useful, again, if you're thinking about co-requisite, prerequisite relationships, or if you're thinking about two related courses and how they both contribute to program learning outcomes. Now to show those again, I'm selecting that range. So I'm highlighting I, and I'm clicking and dragging over to D, and I've selected I and D, and now I can right click and I can, whoops, that's not what I wanted. Gonna undo that, or let's do that one more time. Let's go J to C. Whoops, what happened here? I to D, I'm gonna right click, I wanted to unhide. Here we go. And now I see everything all over again. So that was selecting a single row and using the hide unhide functions in the right click menu. Hide columns. Now the formula is the guts of kind of what's happening here in Excel. First, we have a number of courses addressing each or assessing each program learning outcome. In this cell, J4 in this case, this formula is a count if formula. So it's counting everything in this table from the column CTL 101 to the column CTL 210. And it's counting if there's any text. So that asterisk there returns a count for every cell in that row, in that range between 101 and 110 that has text in it, which is where we get the 3. So just so you know where that's coming from in case you need to adjust that, we're looking at 3 courses contributing to that program learning outcome. This formula is a little different. This is joining all the text. So it's looking at that same range, 101 to 210 in that table. Everything, all the text that is there, if it has text, it will return it in a list with commas in between. So that's just a quick way to get this little list you see here in cell J6. It's one of the pieces of functionality it's built in. I'm actually going to skip down to this final formula down here, and I'll come back to note 7. Note 8 is the last formula in this workbook. At the bottom of each column, you have a count of how many program learning outcomes this course contributes to. So course CTL 210 is contributing to 3 program learning outcomes, and Excel is counting that by counting all of the mastered or introduced or reinforced cells. So everything that's on a PLO line, it's going to count if there's text. Those are the formulas you need to be aware of. And the other thing that you could choose to add is conditional formatting, and I'll close with this. So you could select this whole range. You might select everything here, but let's just say we're going to add some conditional formatting to the last few cells. Up here, up top, you can search. Just a moment. I'm just going to click and drag this out of the way. So you can search conditional formatting. And under conditional formatting, we're going to use a highlight cell rule, and we're going to use a highlight cell rule for text that contains. And this is where we'd add the text introduced, and we would select the conditional formatting we want to use, select done. And now that conditional formatting has been applied so that if on any of those we add in the text introduced, it's going to change its color and it's going to highlight it for us so that we see what's going on there. I hope that helps. Good luck with the template. Let us know if you have any questions, comments as you go. We'd love to collaborate with you as you do your analysis. But kudos to you and your team and this work, and we look forward to hearing about it. Cheers.